Hey, it's Ashley.
And Patty, and we are your co-hosts for the Phoenix Forte podcast. Join us to connect to healing and joy after divorce by chatting with phenomenal guests, fearlessly confronting hot topics, and feeling the spirit with our mic drop moments.
So jump into the flames, rise from the ashes, and be strong and loud as you hang out with us here at Phoenix Forte. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Phoenix Forte. I am so excited for today's episode. I probably say that for every single episode, but the guest that we have today is someone that's been on the edges of my world for a few years, and I've always looked up to her, and I think she's just amazing, and the work that she does and the experiences that she has never cease to amaze me. We were chatting a few minutes before we started recording, and this is going to be a powerful one. So dig in, get cozy. I'm really excited to have Kim Day on our podcast today.
Yes, welcome, Kim. We're so excited to have you. This is a person that's definitely had a huge impact on my life as well. And I'm just so excited for you to be here. I can't wait to get into it. I'm so excited.
I am too. I really appreciate you reaching out and inviting me here.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, would you mind just kind of telling us a little bit about yourself, about your story, and we'll just start with getting to know you a little bit.
All right. Well, I am here because I am divorced. I'm actually divorced and I have been remarried and am divorcing a second time and have experienced betrayal trauma and all sorts of interesting accumulations of experiences in my relationships. I've come to truly believe that our relationships challenge our growth, and we are here to progress, and it is our relationships that help us to do that in ways often that we don't expect. And sometimes I'm insecure about sharing that I'm divorced, and I'm almost always insecure about sharing that I'm divorcing twice, because I have in the past would have been one of those people that would have judged me a lot. For okay, maybe I can let you skate by. Maybe you pick a lemon the first time, but if you do it twice, there's got to be something wrong with you. That's how I would have judged myself. And so I appreciate the chance to come and talk with you and talk with other women who have experienced the challenges of relationships and are trying to make sense of what do they do from here. So in order to, I guess, to take you on my journey of self-discovery and what I have learned, I have to take you a little bit further back than just my first marriage.
Oh.
I was born, okay, I won't take you quite that
on a rainy day. It was Saturday.
I won't go back that far. But I will take you pretty close, because when I was extremely young, too young to have memory of it, I was sexually abused. And my brain did what brains do, is it tried to make sense of that experience. Now, I had no memory of it. I still have no memory of it. I still don't even know the details of it, of what happened. But I know that it happened. I didn't find that out until I was nearly 30. And so many things clicked together when I got that little piece of my own history. Because as a child, for as long as I can remember, I had horrible nightmares. Just extremely intense, very vivid, terrifying nightmares. And they were around a couple of different themes, but that was my brain's way of trying to process what had happened and to communicate some of my reality that I didn't know was my reality to me. But of course, as a kid, it was just too much. It was too intense. All I knew was that I was really, really afraid on a regular basis, afraid to go to sleep. And so what I learned to do, I grew up very religious. I recognized that I was that they were nightmares when I was dreaming. I knew that I was dreaming, and I wanted an escape. I wanted out. I was terrified. I was being chased. I was being tormented, and I wanted out. And so I would fall to my knees in these dreams, and I would just plead with my Heavenly Father to wake me up. And to my recollection, it didn't happen. I would have to wait out that dream till whenever I woke up for whatever reason. And that was a lot of my early memories as a kid. And that for that and a lot of other reasons that I really internalized this disconnect between my emotions and my reality. And I learned to dissociate from those things, and that there was safety in other people's reality. I became a helper. I always have been very empathetic. And so it was safer dealing with other people's realities and other people's problems. And I learned to very naturally just dissociate from my feelings. They didn't matter. They weren't significant. They weren't real. And I would exist in other people's worlds. And so early on, I had that tendency to self-abandon. And I learned that as kind of a way of self-protection and a way of gaining connection and a sense of connecting with others that we all long for, but in a way that I was going so far out of my comfort and my reality and what was good for me without realizing it.
Yeah.
So I learned those patterns. Go ahead, Ashley.
I was just thinking about as a child, just picturing you, imagining this as you're describing it, and how like dreams, and let's talk about dreams and like how silly they can be or how weird they can be. And as a child, not understanding why this is happening so much and why they won't end when you're trying to end them, and trying to figure out how to connect in a safe way, and thinking everybody else just has normal dreams and I've got these terrible nightmares. I just, of course, you'd go, rather than focus on all of the pain and the scary that I experience, I need to just shut me out and come focus on you and where you're at. And let's have the attention on you and what you're going through, because how terrifying is it? And how confusing is it to try to share these pieces of you that don't make sense and wouldn't match what other children were maybe sharing or experiencing, and how scary. I'm just making so many assumptions about your story, but I can just imagine this little girl being like, "Oh, I just dreamt about this," and all the friends going, "That's weird." Like there's no way to respond to this thing, and how lonely that must have just felt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I just assumed everybody had bad nightmares, and I never talked about it. I just figured this was life, and there was that pattern of that invalidation of my emotional reality, because it wasn't real. It was just dreams. Like and they were just feelings. They were just whatever. It wasn't real. And so that intangible personal experience just wasn't valid.
Yeah.
And so I learned to invalidate that for myself and just not tune into that. But I could tune into others. They had, problems that I could solve. That felt so good.
Of
I'll solve
course.
your problems.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna ignore my own. I'm gonna ignore, because there was just so much of that, again, that pattern of invalidating my emotional reality, my intuition, my experience, that became commonplace, and that became the norm. But I paid attention to rules. I was a rule follower. I paid attention to structure and authority. And so I learned, again, I mentioned I grew up very religious. And so I learned that if you follow this recipe, you're going to be happy, you're good, you get an A, whatever it is.
You know what to expect. The
You know what
rules will
to
always lead
expect.
to where they're supposed to be.
Yep, there
Yeah.
was this predictability, and
Yeah.
in something that was very unpredictable for me, I wanted to trust the structure. And so one of the structures I learned that I've heard many women report is you grow up, you keep the commandments, you you find a return missionary, you marry in the temple, and then you live your happily ever after. And so I had this focus on kind of these obvious, overt criteria, and I didn't have the skills for recognizing who was emotionally safe and who wasn't. And in fact, I have learned since there was a draw to situations that weren't necessarily emotionally safe because it was familiar.
Mm.
And so I married my husband, and we started our happily ever after that never started. Things started really bad, essentially day one.
Mm.
He had a sexual addiction and a variety of ways of acting out. And it went really bad really fast. And it was actually one of the blessings of that marriage that it was so short and so intense in and so overt in the catastrophe.
Mm.
And I just for sake of time, I'll skip a lot of the details of growing into kind of what culminated in needing to flee, really. There was a couple of years where I told myself, this is normal. This is just what everybody struggles with. This is what I was being told too. All men struggle with porn addiction. You're making too big of a deal out of that.
Marriage is hard. You need to
Marriage.
compromise.
Yes. See, why is it we're told all the same things?
Why are
And
we
of course,
told
I
this?
believed them. I actually even had a counselor, his therapist that was supposed to be an expert in pornography addiction, who was also a member of our faith, who said, well, pornography is a sin. That's what you use your wife for. And he turned to me and said, you're willing to help out with that, right?
Oh my gosh.
And I remember that gut instinct, a moment, just that little glimmer of no. But of course, I overrided it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, of course, I want to be helpful. And so I really easily fell into this, I've seen so many of our beautiful sisters and powerful women fall into this narrative of, I need to, how do I help with this? How do I control this? How do I sacrifice myself enough um, to make this better for him?
Disconnect from my discomfort to ensure that
Yes.
he's not going to make these choices.
Yep.
Right.
And
This is
I
my
was,
fault if he
yeah,
messes up. It's on
yes.
me because I
Oh, it
wasn't helping
was.
enough. So it has
Yeah.
to
It
be my
was.
fault, right? All these issues have to be on me.
Yes. Because
Right.
if I was satisfying enough, he wouldn't have to go to
Mhm.
that. And I
Right.
was the queen of falling into this really destructive narrative, to the point where I felt like it was my job to try to intervene before he slept up. And so I had charts and graphs of when like his cycle, and I was like super monitoring of his moods, and I knew that he was getting close to relapsing. The meaner and crueler he got, and that would mean take off your clothes and jump into bed. But even that, obviously, that didn't work very well. That didn't help the addiction, and it was extremely destructive. It was so extremely destructive um, to to fall into those false beliefs about myself, about what I had control over, about whose responsibility was this. And so that is why I said it was a blessing that things got bad really quickly. Not bad. They started off bad. They got explosively bad pretty quickly. And I spent a lot of time healing after that, trying to get any sort of clarification of reality. It took me a year. I got separated in the divorce. The divorce was a year, almost to the day of that day that I left. And by that time, I was very clear that that's what I wanted. But it took a lot of work, and it took a lot of kind of reconnecting with real. But I remember those early days when I'd first left, just feeling so free and so open to this idea that the universe made sense again. because it had been like I was living in the twilight zone when I came and when I left and got away from that, gravity started working again and the laws of physics fell into place. And it was like, oh, yes, this predictable world that has natural laws. And that was not the world I was living
Yeah.
in the chaos of that relationship. So it really was a really huge benefit to me that things came out really quickly. Again, I left about 2 years and it took me another year to get the divorce official. So I had the benefit of kind of an extreme story, and as I healed even after that divorce, and years later, I found out that my master's degree in counseling psychology was actually good for something. Because when I first got it, I was in this marriage and I'm like, I don't want to deal with anybody else's problems. I can't
Mm.
even imagine trying to navigate that. And then as I found the freedom and the healing that comes from these shifts in the way we think about the things and the way that we think about ourselves and these patterns that we have that we don't even realize sometimes that we have. I really fell in love with the desire to be part of that work.
Yeah.
And so I've been working in betrayal trauma, sexual addiction, working with women, and especially around abuse dynamics became an area of passion for me to help women to see the patterns that are often covert in
Yeah.
their relationships that were destructive to them. And I've been doing that for roughly about 5 years. But before I found a program called Worth. Before I found that program and found my own coaching, I did remarry, and to a man who was extremely different, extremely different. And I just thought, I have arrived. This man doesn't cheat. He doesn't do porn. Like that was like, oh, like I found the one in the million uh, that that wasn't an issue for. And I was very grateful for some of his strengths and his character around that, where he didn't cheat and he was, as far as I know, he was faithful. And so it really came as kind of, I don't know if I can say a surprise to me. Um, well, no, I'm not going to say it that way. I'm going to say, um, because of the intensity and the overtness of my first marriage, it was easy to minimize some of the things in my second marriage because they weren't what was happening in the first marriage. My husband felt respectful and he felt honest and he felt faithful, but there were a lot of pieces that were missing that that as time went on, became more and more significant. One of the common patterns was when emotions got involved, namely any of his emotions, there was no space for dialogue or collaboration. There was no relationship,
Mm.
and there was no relating, and there was no repair for that. It was just there was a lack of empathy. There was an extreme lack of emotional safety. Anything related to humanness or vulnerability or emotional connection was extremely threatening to him. And so I learned to tiptoe around any of those very human sorts of ways of relating and
Yeah.
avoid them and not bring emotion, not ask for connection, not ask for relational needs because
Yeah.
they weren't available. But and it was very uncomfortable for him. And it would get into a kind of these circular conversations of, well, this is yours. You're the one who has issues. This is, and I believed that, or I doubted enough for a while that that was the case, that I just needed to keep working on me and not ask anything of him.
Yeah.
But it got to the point where it became very clear to me that it was okay not just okay, it was right to expect my person to offer emotional safety, to offer emotional connection, um, to allow space for me to be a whole person, to have feelings or to have needs or to um, have any of those human elements that allow deep relationships to exist and to flourish. I was once again minimizing or hiding or trying to eliminate those parts of me. And it took me to a very dark spot. And I realized I needed to stop and I needed to ask for him to learn those things if he was willing.
Mm.
And, um, and that's what led me into my second divorce. Because I believed strongly that I couldn't mandate that for him. That had to be something that he wanted.
Yeah.
And that it was, and if it really wasn't, it was a way of being the most loving, both to myself and to him, to say, this is not going to work if these relational elements are never going to be in place. And I can wait for you to grow these skills. But if you don't want that, I'm not going to force it. And I'm not going to beg. And I'm going to honor your choice to say, that's not how you want to have a relationship. And say, okay, we got to redefine that. Because a marriage to me has to have those elements. It has to. Not perfectly, but they need to be there.
Yeah. Oh, the tiptoeing around and trying to find the right thing to say so that you can be present, but also not crack any of the eggshells, right? That tiptoeing around is so common. I just think so many people experience that dynamic, and connecting that back to where you started of, as a child, I immediately stopped paying attention to my needs and where I was at and fully focused on the other people and how could I exist in their world.
Mm-hmm.
It's we just don't see how these things connect all the time. And so I'm really grateful that you went all the way back and told that piece of your story, and to see that theme come full circle of always prioritizing someone else. And I had this moment as you were talking, you said, in a relationship, for me, I need those things. And I wanted to stop and go, not just for you, everyone. Relationships need this ability to connect. Relationships need this opportunity to show up as vulnerable and to make a request and say, can you learn this tool? Because we need to be able to have intimacy in all of the areas,
Yes,
emotionally, psychologically. Yeah. All of the
Yes.
different things. Yeah, it has to have that, all relationships, not just relationships to you. That's what a healthy relationship looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took a long time for me to feel like it was okay to to hold that standard. Because what I did was, yeah, that's nice, and I'd like to have that standard, but if it's not available, then I can't ask for it. And
Yeah.
so being able to say, no, this is what I need. And if that's not something that you want to give, that is your right.
Okay.
And we have to look at that reality. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
And so, but you're right. I'm glad you picked up on that. That's one of the big learning things for me, was to be able to realize that my pattern that I'd learned of negating my emotional reality and finding people that felt comfortable with, and saying, it's okay for me to now say, I want this, because that, for me, and I agree for everyone, that's part of a healthy relationship. It's part of what challenges us to grow and to mature, is to allow space for others to have their reality, but also to allow space for ourselves and to connect with those parts of me that I had for so long minimized and negated, and say, no, no more, no more. And to believe that that actually was a good thing.
Right.
not
That had
just
to be
for me,
so
but for my
hard.
Yeah.
kids, because my
Yes.
Yeah.
kids needed me to be someone who would champion a home of emotional safety and emotional maturity, and that they were going to look at me as a model. And if I was shut down and numb and dead emotionally or disconnected from myself, they would learn the exact same way of being that I had learned.
Yeah.
And it would perpetuate that cycle of that disconnection with self.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't being unloving. In fact, it was being very loving to
Very
hold
loving.
that standard and say, this is what I need. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Ben.
Yes. And something else I wanted to touch on that you shared that I'm going to be super vulnerable here that I can also like relate to. And I'm really glad that you said it because I'm going to spend some time like pondering on that because I feel like even for me personally and even other women that I know that are going through the whole like dating after divorce thing and all that stuff, it's like I do tend to do that same thing of like almost uh not intentionally, but maybe so. I'm not sure, but comparing them to my ex-husband and being like, oh, but he does this guy that I
Yeah.
really like and is so cute and I really want to date. He does not abuse me. He does not look at pornography. So like this is good. Oh, but he does some of these really toxic things. Oh, but it's not abusive technically. And but like almost like minimizing or even like making excuses for other little things because they're not quite as bad as
Yeah.
what I experienced before.
Before.
And so anyways, I that's a very good tidbit of information that I think I needed to hear
Yes.
and I think that a lot of listeners can relate to that it is so natural to do that, I think, and to look for those good things because it's exciting to find someone who is not constantly looking at porn or going and finding prostitutes to sleep with or other things like that, it feels like so exciting. Like, oh my gosh, there's a human out here that doesn't do these things. And you want to just jump on board. And of course, like, I don't know. It's just like we're looking for this fulfilling, healthy relationship. And it looks like they have all these good qualities. Why not? And it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
like,
Or at least
but
they don't
yeah,
have the harmful qualities that the last one had, right? The
Yep.
ones that are
right.
my red flags, they don't have those. So everything else is
Yes.
probably
So
great.
let me just ignore all the other, maybe ignore or minimize some of the
Yeah.
other red flags that are maybe being present because it's like almost like even doubting ourselves too in a way of like, but are those really red flags?
Yeah.
They don't, I don't know. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like all that. So I thought that was really, I'm really glad that you shared that because like I said, I even personally can relate to that and really needed to hear that. And just something definitely for me to think on.
Thank you. I'm glad you highlighted and brought that up. That's one of the things that I hope others can gain from my lived experiences. Because of my first marriage, I was looking for what to avoid in my
Mhm.
second marriage. And I knew I was very clear. Like, I want somebody who is not a sex addict, who is not crazy,
Right.
weird sexual issues. I also wanted somebody who was ambitious and not, so I knew what I wanted to avoid, and I found that. But I
Yeah.
didn't yet know what I wanted to make sure was
Mm,
there. I
Yeah.
didn't understand the pieces that were critical to make sure were in place. I was looking at what to make
Yeah.
sure that wasn't what wasn't there. And so
Yes.
as we grow and we learn about ourselves and we learn and you're looking for someone to share a life with, look for what is there and what you need to be there, not just what you want to avoid
Yeah.
again.
yes.
Yeah. I, before we started recording, when we were just chatting, you said that going through a divorce now, you're different this time, that things you've experienced have led that in this moment, you're different this time through. And I wonder, just observing, if part of that difference is the ability to recognize who you are and what it is that you want and you need in relationships. And so you're not making a decision to get out of abuse. You're making a decision to connect more truthfully, more
To
authentically with
yourself.
who you are and what you're needing.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And this is where in the past, and this is where I was, and I have lots of grace for that younger Kim. Um, that's why I say it was a blessing that it got so extreme because I needed it to be big and overt and kind of to force my choice because I wasn't in a place where I was capable of taking that responsibility. I was so hardwired to like endure to the end means staying with this person no matter what. Like, no, there's no, I needed something to be like, I needed something really extreme to hold up the mirror in front of me and be like, okay, Kim, you really don't have a choice anymore. Run. And
I felt the same way in my experience. I had been praying about if I needed to leave, and looking back now, it was abusive. I needed to leave. But I didn't know that in
yes,
the moment, right? I'd been praying about it and I've been trying to decide. And what I did was attend a class on relationships and how to be a better wife. And so I attended this class and I noted all of the ways that I was a horrible wife and all the things that I was doing wrong.
oh,
And I went back home and I said, listen, husband, I've learned all of these things. I'm doing all of these things wrong. And now I've learned. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm trying to be better. And I'm so sorry that I've been doing all of these horrible things. And he teared up and he said, I finally feel seen for the first time in our marriage. And 2 days later, he acted out in a way that was extreme, so extreme that I didn't have a choice. I was out. And I remember contemplating that experience and why did I have all of this and going, oh, Heavenly Father had already told me I needed to leave. And it got to the point where he was like, clearly you're not going to do that. So let's make it a little bit more extreme. Get you
More
to a place
clear.
where you can go, no, 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 you are valuable. You do need to be seen. You don't have to
yeah,
stay in this.
yeah.
You have
Isn't
to
it
Yeah.
completely kill
amazing?
yourself.
Yeah.
Isn't amazing this plan? We are really, I truly believe that we are watched out for. And these things that sometimes in the moment seem like the most horrible thing in the world is what is the key to our freedom. And I needed somebody to do that for me in my first marriage. And but and now I am doing that for myself. I'm
Mm.
saying I know that I have freedom. I don't need something to force my hand, even though it was so extremely hard, and it should be. These decisions are really there's so much is impacted
Yeah.
our lives to when we're connected with someone, when we've created a family. But in a weird way, I feel like I'm even I champion the cause of family more freely now, but from a lens of this is what, like, this is families aren't perfect. They don't need to be perfect, but there are elements and relationships, there are elements that need to be in place
Yes.
for them to be beneficial to those parties. And when
Yeah.
that's not, when those pieces are not in place, generally every effort should be made to put them into place. But then if there's a limit to what one person can do.
Yeah.
And when the relationship, when that is not serving the function of uplifting both partners, it is not serving its function. Therefore,
Yes.
why keep like is it just why continue? Because it's not what it was meant to be.
Yeah.
So it either needs to be repaired or it needs to be dismantled. If it's destructive, and I wasn't in a place to give myself permission to do that unless it was really extreme and obvious. And
Yeah.
but this time I was. And this time I felt much more in line. This was a much more deeply spiritual experience as far as moving into where I felt I needed to go. And in a weird way, as I've reflected in these last months, it in a weird way, it's come full circle for me. And I think it will continue to do so. But that experience of that little girl who felt abandoned, who felt alone, who felt like the world was too big and too terrifying and too unsafe, who felt that nobody was going to have her back, even when she was pleading for relief and release from the terror. What I have come to believe is that even though I wasn't woken up instantly from my nightmare, that I was never left alone in it.
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, that became part of my story. I felt alone and abandoned, and I felt and I learned these habits of dealing with that reality. But looking back now, going through these hardships in life, I still pray. I want this to happen. I want relief. I want release. I want out. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes I get the support and the strength that I need. And I have learned to trust that I have someone there with me who does have my back, who does know and see and care about my experience, and who is championing the cause of Kim.
Yes.
That even when I don't get it my way, the way that I want, that I get it the way that I need it. And so this time I've been able to lean into the comfort of that belief in a way that I couldn't in the last time, when it was just fleeing terror and crazy people, crazy actions. Even though, and I think this is why one of the reasons I love to tell my story in some of the little pieces, is you can see how I was led even getting out of that first marriage. But I didn't see it in the moment. And so now I feel more confident in leading in, even though I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to play out. I trust that that things are working for my good. Even when things are scary, I'm not alone. And that it is more powerful to be connected with myself and to be true to myself, because it is in that space that I find that I'm not just connected with myself, but I'm connected with my Lord, who has always been there, who I just couldn't see. And that is why I like this song.
Well, yes, we need to go straight into the song. I want to repeat that though. It is more powerful to be connected with myself, because in that space is when I realize I'm connected with my Lord. My goodness. Whew, that's just hitting all of the feels. And you brought it full circle, but I was about to too, because what I observed was, as a small child, you were pleading for this to end, and it seemingly didn't. And then in your first marriage, it was like that. He finally woke you up. He's like, wake up. We're waking up now. It's time to get out. And then what you said was, ending the second marriage, you said, but I'm taking the control now. It's like you learned how to wake yourself up and to stop the nightmare, to recognize it was happening, and not just plead for it to end, but to recognize it's happening and go, no, I am connected with myself and my Lord. I've got the power. I can stop this. I can rescue myself out of that. Not in a I'm greater than my Savior thing, but in I'm yoked with my Savior and I'm leading out as I get out of this space. And it was just so incredible. I'm so grateful that you have shared your story and where you've gone, and this circle that you brought into it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's such strong testimony that he has your back no matter what, and that he is striving for the cause of Kim. And like I just love all of that. So yes, let's please get into the mic drop moment.
Yes.
And the song that you chose is "You Have Nothing to Fear" by Rob Gardner. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the song? Is there like a specific lyric that you love, or just tell us whatever you want to share about it?
You know what? I'm just going to read some of the words.
Okay.
I will say I love the idea of, because there's so much of my story that felt, and my history that felt scary and threatening and intense and dangerous. And it was important for me to connect with that. It was important with the wake up. Ashley, you said it so well, like, wake up, Kim. Like, you were like, sorry, I'm going to take a tangent. I have so many new ladies who are coming in these very raw places and who are doing these things that I relate to. And I just want to hug them and say, you're doing so well. Do you realize how bad I was, like how messed up I was? And women have just this intuitive sense of what is right and what is good, and how to move forward. And yeah, so if sharing my story and how stuck in these false ways of thinking is helpful, it's part of why I like to offer that, is to just realize that there is a lot of hope no matter where you are. But I like this contrast. Back to your question of why I like this song. I like the contrast between recognizing where there is danger, where things aren't safe, and moving and creating realities that are healthier, that are safer, that are more in line with what is good and true. And in all of it, not letting fear run our lives and trusting that at the end of the day, no matter what it is that we're afraid of, even if it is a horrible nightmare that we find ourselves in the middle of, we are being watched over and it will be all right. So these are some of these lyrics. It says, "You have nothing to fear from the journey, though your way may be burdened by thorns. For the Lord will be with you each step of the way as you travel with faith through the storm. You have nothing to fear from your trials, though they may seem too heavy to bear. Take his hand, and he'll lead you gently along, and you'll find peace and safety there. There's nothing to fear from the nights that are lonely. There's nothing to fear from the cold. There is nothing to fear from what might be tomorrow. For heaven is with you, and angels watch over his fold. You have nothing to fear from the journey, though your body is tired and worn. For the Lord will send angels to lift up your arms, and he'll carry the burden you've borne. And you've nothing to fear from your suffering, nor the grief you've been called on to bear. Take his hand, and he'll lead you gently along, and you'll find peace and safety there."
You reading that just brought all of the feels. If you're listening and not watching, we're all over here sobbing.
It's just quiet because we're crying. It's okay.
Oh, it's so powerful. The way that you prefaced the song and then just the pace that you read it. Maybe it was just for me today. But it was exactly what I needed to hear. I think it's going to be exactly what some of listeners out there need to hear. So thank you for sharing this song with us.
Yes, and just thank you for coming on this podcast and sharing your story. Like, I know you, so like I already know like how amazing and awesome and just all the things that you are, but getting to hear it this way on this side of things is just a little bit different. And anyways, I just love you so much more, and I'm just so grateful for you and for like just your honesty and vulnerability and just your insights on what you've experienced. Like it's invaluable. It is so, so helpful and so impactful. And I'm really, really grateful. Like, I'm so, so grateful that you were brave enough and courageous enough and confident enough to get out here and get on this episode and share this with us. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
For anyone else who's been touched or uplifted by you and your story and your example, would you feel comfortable sharing just a little bit of your safe space and what it is that you do now with your experience and what you champion?
Yeah, where people can maybe find you or your resources or anything.
I'm so glad you asked. That's a great question. I hadn't even thought of that. And I love that I have a chance to talk about that. So I created Safe Space last year for women who are in or healing from destructive and confusing relationship patterns. Just because I relate. I relate to how hard it is to make sense of what is real. And I wanted women to have some resources to check themselves and some resources for identifying and discerning what was happening to them and giving them some of those additional narratives or those additional ways of thinking about and approaching issues rather than the ones that we're kind of handed over when we're young, of just be more patient, just be more Just think less about yourself. Just be more forgiving. Just be more, right? Just that. Just be more. Are you having issues? Well, just be more, and that'll work better. And I
Right.
tried that. And I
Doesn't
tried
work.
and I tried.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
So I wanted to connect women with, especially with the language of what's happening and helping them differentiate between, okay, these are normal marital issues. There's always going to be issues and conflict in marriage, in any healthy relationship. And these are ones that are kind of red flags. And these are signs that you're in patterns that are destructive to you. And what's the difference? And how do you differentiate? And how do you respond to that? And what are your options? And what are your tools? And what are some skills? And all of that. And so I created a website. It's onesafespace.com. And that women can sign up. And there's a podcast, a private podcast. There are rooms that are designed to represent our different areas of our well-being, of our wholeness. So the kitchen represents the physical domain, and the bedroom represents the sexual domain, and the office represents the financial domain. And there's the bathroom represents the relational, psychological domains. And so there are a lot of resources that you can kind of hone into what is normal in this domain and assess for yourself what is going on for me. And the idea is to help you. There's a lot of worksheets. I like worksheets. I like processing things. And so help you to identify what are the patterns that are at play for me and in my relationship, and what do I do about that. The gym represents action, and how do you empower yourself to move and to shift things. So it's something that was just a passion project of the heart that I wanted to put out there for women. And so it's available now. And if you're interested, check it out and feel free to email me with any questions.
It really is such a beautiful and incredible resource with so many different areas. You have everything from financial understanding and well-being and what that looks like, to mindfulness, to that what you were talking about. This is a destructive pattern. This is kind of the clumsy pattern. Here's how we discern the difference. So anyone interested in getting a hold of all of those resources and participating in that, onesafespace.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
ONE.
Incredible.
So spell it out, onesafespace.com.
Yes, and I got to be a tester for Safe Space, actually. I'm so grateful to be that. And I absolutely loved it. I love the videos, the worksheets. I'm just that same way. I like a homework assignment. I'm all about that. I'm like, give me this. I'm all right. Yeah, let me do that. And so I love that. And I thought that was super, super helpful. So I encourage any and everybody to do that just in general. Like, it's just very, even if you've maybe never experienced some of the things that we talk about on this podcast, it was very educational and helpful to have. So it's definitely a resource worth checking out for sure.
Yep. Right.
Okay.
Thanks so much for coming on here, Kim. I just don't want it to end. It's been so wonderful.
I know.
I'm going to be listening myself to this episode over and over and over again, and just, I connect with my power when I connect with myself. This is beautiful. Thanks so much for coming.
Yes.
And Patty, do you want to take us out today? Or do you want me to?
I will let you, because I know that you do our catchphrase, so I'm going to let you do it.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Remember that you're not crazy and you're not alone. And we'll see you again next time.
All right.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We would love to hear from you. Please connect with us on social media at Phoenix Forte Pod, POD. Feel free to send us any questions or comments on Instagram.